Hey guys, this is Janelle Payne, Nail Gun Nelly, and I'm going to show you how I made this DIY herringbone countertop for my built-ins. This is all made from pine 1x2s, 1x4s, and 1x3s. And I cut all of them at 45-degree angles. So how I got the length that I needed was I basically cut my first board at a 45 and took my under plywood piece here and marked center, drew a line, and then I also marked center the opposite way and held up my first 1x2 at that point. So I made sure that the edge of the 45-degree cut was flush with that line, and then I marked with a pencil at the edge of the other side to get the opposite 45-degree. Once I had that first one done, I was able to just take it down to the miter saw and cut a ton of different boards using that one piece as a template. Once I had a good stack of them, I came and you can see here where I drew the center line, and then I started dry fitting all of my 1x2s just to see how many I was going to need and then how far I could get before the template was going to change. And because I hate having to buy supplies, I always like to use what I have. You can see that this piece of plywood was actually a little shallower than I needed. So this back area where I'm standing, the boards are hanging off, but I knew that it was going to be okay because it was going to be up against the wall. And I just made sure that the opposite side, now where I'm standing, was flush with the board so that when I trimmed it out, it would be sturdy. You can see here also, I thought that the 1x2s was getting a little busy and repetitive, so I decided to cut some 1x4s and 1x3s and kind of disperse them throughout evenly just to mix up the sizing. So you can see here that a lot of this is just dry fitting and getting your cuts right, because once you go and glue them down, it's really hard to be able to make it adjusted and have the seam in the middle meet up perfectly, which is by far the most important part. So once I had all of the boards laid out that were the same as the original template, I then took the 1x2s I had left over and figured out the two center sections where each cut I pretty much measured as I went. They all still were 45-degree angles, but every single one got shorter as you work your way out to the outside of the table. So once I had everything dry fit and cut, I brought the tabletop back into the inside where the built-in is because I wanted to use that back wall as a guide to where my 1x2s would stop. I also was going to have to cut around these posts that I put in. So I put the table on the top. You can see how it is a little shorter than it needs to be. But if there's one thing you know about me, I love to use any scraps that I have. So I was able to make this work. So now that I had the tabletop on the built-in, I brought in all my cut 1x2s that I dry fitted, and I made sure that I kept them in the same order. And then I kind of just dry fitted it again because I wanted to make sure now that it was going up against the wall here that it didn't throw off the angles at all. So I just went through and dry fit it all down. And you can see here, I even made a mistake and started putting them on the wrong section because this group goes down here. And so I wanted to make sure everything was in place before I actually glued and nailed them in place because that would make my job way more difficult if I would have started gluing these down and made the mistake that I just made right now. So you can see I'm quickly laying them all out, and now the edges that are next to the post, you can see one that is sticking out right there. And so I'm going to have to figure out all of those final cuts. And it was basically just trial and error. I marked what I thought it was and cut a 45 until it fit flush. So once I had all of those cuts, everything was ready to go. I worked in sections and used Titebond wood glue on each, and then my pin nailer, which made it way more easy to wood fill after. So if you don't have one, I highly recommend getting a pin nailer. I did the same thing on this side and made sure that that center seam was super tight because that's where your eye is going to be drawn. Okay, so I have all of this area totally secure. And now I'm going to work on this. I'm going to start with this back section because I can just follow the wall and this middle line. So I'm going to take, this is all from when I was dry fitting. Oops, not that one. So these middle sections I haven't done yet. So I'm just going to put this one over here. And this one over here. I don't want to get them messed up. So I'm just going to pull these back so that I'll be able to see the line that I drew that's on the center. I'm going to glue one board at a time. Let's actually take this out and keep them in order. I am using Tight Bond wood glue. I always use it. And then a pin nailer. I highly recommend a pin nailer. I, for years, just figured I didn't need it. And then Grandpa Rich brought it over for me to use for something, and I love it. There's so many more times where I need this rather than my brad nail, and the holes are tiny. So it makes your finish work so much better. So I am using the 1 inch. So these boards are 3/4 inch boards because they're just 1x2s. And then this is, I think, a 1/4 inch plywood. So these are perfect. You can see here, you can see that, well, they go this way, that they will go in and then just go in this board. So it's perfect. This will just allow me to make sure that they don't slide around when the wood glue is drying. So load those up and let's start on this back wall. So I'm just putting glue, and I'm going to start this first section so that this top area, so that this section is a perfect V. So I'm gonna lay it here and then push it that way against the wall and then secure it. And I'm gonna continue this on. That one might be off a little, but it's okay. We're gonna have something that's gonna cover it, or if you weren't, you could just caulk it. This one is the one that your eye is gonna see, this geometric shape. So once I got the entire sides done, I worked on this center part so you can see how each one is getting smaller and smaller. But once again, these are still all 45-degree cuts. They're just at different directions. And so this is the last section that I had to do. And you can see, if you look at the very front, that the cuts are a little off. And I knew I was going to put a cap, but I needed to straighten that out. So that's what I did next. So I took a level and I basically took the shortest piece and lined it up and drew a line so that all of the little cuts that I do would be level with the shortest one. So I marked that, and then I used my jigsaw to cut out all the excess boards so that the line across would be level. And what I mean is I'm basically taking 1x2s like this and mitering the corners so that I can cap all of these 1x2s so that from the front it's going to look flush and not like a bunch of boards that were put together. So the blade ended up being really bad and I didn't have a spare, so jigsaw for the win. So I cut that out, and then I did just take my sanding block and lightly sanded all of the rough edges and any rip out that I had. And that way I was able to put the 1x2 directly on it, but you can see here it just gives it a nice cleaner look. Okay, I did this on accident as I was just trying to clean up some of my mess. I was sweeping it in, and then I started realizing that it would probably be better to use the actual clippings from this wood to fill in some of the cracks. So I'm basically just taking the sawdust and brushing it all over, and then anything that is, so you can kind of see how it's almost acting like a a wood filler. But obviously I'm still gonna come back with a wood filler, but it's filling in the bigger gaps naturally with the same like wood fibers that they are. So it blends better. So this is actually like the same concept as making your own wood filler when you take wood glue and the actual sawdust and you mix it up into like a little paste, and that works as wood filler as well. So after I did wood fill any other gaps, I sanded it with 220, and then you can see here I took my 1x2, added wood glue to the edge, and then I used a brad nailer to secure this because the pin nailer wasn't keeping it tight enough. I also used clamps to hold it in place while I did so, and I basically made sure at each brad nail that it was flush with the front of the herringbone and kind of worked my way down bending the wood because no wood is actually completely straight. You can see here. So once that was secured, I pushed it back up against the wall and measured for this side piece, cut that and secured it the same, and then I sanded everything. You can see the edges are round there, and got ready to stain. So I used my go-to stain. Usually with pine, I will use a whitewash first, but because that cancels out the yellow, but I didn't in this case because all the other wood in this area of my house is stained this way. This is Minwax Special Walnut, and it just was looking a little messy to me. So I did apply one coat and then went through with a second coat, and it still was not looking good to me. So I ended up taking Minwax Dark Walnut and adding a coat of that on top. You can see here, and it was much deeper in color and just didn't show as much of the variation. And so I ended up landing with this. So it's 2 coats Minwax Special Walnut followed by 1 coat of dark walnut, also by Minwax. So once that was able to dry, I let it dry for probably a couple days. I used polyurethane triple thick, and I've done probably 3 coats of polyurethane, and I sanded with a 320 sanding block in between coats, and that just gives it that really smooth protected finish, easily wipeable, and this table has made all the difference. I also added these beams up top because I have a special little project that's going on the back wall, so I promise that blue paint there is not going to be staying. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and feel that this is a doable DIY for you. And let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. Like the video, and like always, I'd love if you'd subscribe, and we'll see you next time with my next tutorial. Thanks for watching.